Hi everybody, it's Darryl. Thanks very much for your time today. We're going to be talking about how we can target our students to kick goals. It's a nice sporting analogy, but really what we're saying is how knowing our students improves them in their achievements. This is our agenda. We're going to talk about NAPLAN, what has an effect on student outcomes, what do we need to do to improve the students. I'll be talking to you a lot about data during the course of the day. What do we need to do? What do we need to do for student improvement? How does it benefit our students? How does it benefit us? That's really important. There's no point in doing something new if it's going to be too much hard work for us. And finally, what do we actually need to do to help these kids attain their success? Okay, so what has got the biggest effect? You know I love Hattie. John Hattie is he's just such a wonderful expert, and he's identified these 6 things as having the biggest effect on students. We all know that teachers are the most responsible for having the biggest effect on student outcomes. So we're all passionate, we all want to be here, we love teaching. This is how we can make it easier and better for us. The second most important thing is, you see, the second biggest effect is about us working together. Now, you know that the school has gone from being split stream to single stream to allow us to have more collaborative time together. You know that we once a week we all meet up for an hour at the very least to do collaboration, and then once a month in our weekly school meetings, in our weekly meetings, we all get together and we collaborate there. So we're using that time together. If you have a look at number 4, maximize feedback to teachers about their impact. The maximizing your feedback to teachers is about analyzing the data to see what your students are doing, who's getting it, who's not getting it, and then focusing on that to be able to help your students progress. It's not about somebody coming into the classroom and saying, oh, you know, I like the way you got all these pictures on the wall, and then they leave. This is actually for us to sit together as teachers in collaboration, analyze the data of what we're doing in our classes, discuss what we've done for our students, and be able to then say, this worked, this didn't work. How can we make this better? Oh, let me help you out with that. So we're working together. We are collectively working to solve all of our students' problems. Numbers 5 and number 6, getting the proportions of surface to deep correct, making sure that what we're teaching our kids is actually at their level and is meaningful. And number 6, that Goldilocks principle. We have to make sure that the challenges and the difficulties that we present to our students is sufficient to keep them engaged and to keep them motivated and to keep them learning. If it's too easy, they get bored. If it's too hard, they become disgruntled. Then they become bored. Then they become disruptive. So the idea is we need to understand who they are by looking at their data and then helping them to move forward. So the thing that made me think about this, that really made me focus. Now, you know I love Elastic. You know I love the data program that we use. I've done lots of PL. We've all done PL as a school. I use it all the time. But it was this trend. I was looking at NAPLAN. If you have a look at that, 2021, we've dropped off to 2022. In some areas, it's a small drop, and in some areas, it's a tiny gain. In fact, it's only one area. Spelling is a tiny gain. But if you look at it over time, the trend, the gradual trend is that we are dropping all the way through. So how do we arrest this trend? We can, get a new maths program, which I think is pointless because I really like what we do. We can go and get a new spelling program or a new writing program. We can invest in all these things, or we can analyze the data and actually determine from our students what their weaknesses are. And when I say their, I'm not saying collectively as the whole, what's the biggest weakness of all of them? And even though I'm going to talk about that, but the individual weakness. So analyzing an individual student down to their particular weaknesses, and then being able to use that to set up an individual differentiation or a group differentiation program that targets them and helps them to progress. So thinking back to Hattie's biggest effects, greatest effects on student outcomes, what do students need? What do they need to improve? Number 1, it's us as teachers, collaborating on lessons and outcomes. Consulting that data in collaborative meetings, looking at elastic and saying, this is your class, this is all of our classes together. What are the areas of weakness? What are the things that our students' results are telling us that we need to be teaching? Because there's no point, if a student is failing a year 2 concept, there's no point teaching them, again, the same concept in year 3 and failing, and the same concept in year 4, and the same concept in year 5. It makes more sense for us to go back and say, right, you guys are struggling with this. Let's do it. We don't need a checklist to say, well, I've taught it to them. We don't need a checklist to say, yes, they can answer 6 out of 8 questions. Let's actually go through and drill down, interrogate the data, and find exactly what it is that our students are weak at, and teach that exact thing to them. Build their strength and their capabilities in those areas. It'll have 2 benefits. Number 1, it'll help them overall to achieve greater results. But number 2, when we come to NAPLAN next year, our scores will go up again. And this is our whole objective. Our whole objective is to help our students be the best, to achieve the best that they can achieve. So, what do students need to do? We need to create an individual program for them. Now, that individual program may fall into a group program, but you're not going to say, right, you 6 kids, think of reading groups. You 6 kids are in the bottom group, you 4 in the next group, you guys, and then you stay in that group for the rest of the year. We're talking about an individualized differentiated program that is malleable, that moves with the child. So you might have a smart kid, one of the so-called smart kids, who's struggling with this year 2 concept, working with one of the so-called lower kids, who's also having the same thing. You put them together, but once they've achieved that, once they've got it, you can then move them into different groups based on the same thing. So that child's individual program, and all the kids will have their own individual program, will then still overlap with others. So you still got group work. Now, children love group work. Studies have shown that it works, it's effective, but it's got to be at the right level. You can't have too high or too low. Right. So how do we know who needs help? Here's the data. Have a look at this. So this is the year 5 cohort. This is all their PAT testing for the last 4 years, and this is their NAPLAN year 5 testing. This is where they did it last year. So if you have a look there, that red bar, this red bar over here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, is the highest failure. 77 out of 85 students got that wrong. And that thing that they got wrong is a year 3 concept, making models of 3-dimensional objects and describing key features. These are students who couldn't describe a sphere properly. 77 out of 85. So, you know, it's a simple thing for us to do. But instead of us going, oh, they're having an issue with shape, this is telling me exactly. It's ACMNG 063, right? Measurement in geometry 063. Perfect. And then using elastic, circled in red, 77 students got it wrong. It's telling you the exact code. Using elastic, I can then go from here and click on that code, and it will bring up the second screen and it will give me the lesson guide. I can allocate that lesson guide to students within Shobi. I can give it to them in Keynote. They can then work on it. They can practice it on their own. It's got the lessons. It's got practice questions. I, as a teacher, can then allocate more questions to them. But this is what we need to be doing. Instead of just saying, oh, well, they're struggling with that, teach them again. And this is where we use the technology to support that individualized differentiation. That student will work on it at their own pace. Yes, they're collectively doing it as a group. But if someone picks it up much quicker than the other, there's no point saying, all right, now all of you sit at the same pace. They just keep moving forward. We use tools like Study Ladder to set up that individualized differentiation as a collective. Now we need to be able to say, I'm allocating these tasks to you specifically because I know where your area of weakness is. Right. So what do we need to do for our student improvement? We need to get that comprehensive diagnostic data. We should be running the gap analysis all the time. Now, I'm not saying do it every day, but we need to be running it so that you can see which students are moving and then analyze it by the student. I chose the cohort so you could see, because we're here 5 students, we're here 5 teachers, but I've chosen that you as a teacher can analyze an individual so you can see where their areas of weakness are and then be able to start allocating these tasks to them so that you can help them increase and improve. Right? Define, you've got to let them know what success looks like. You can't just say, here, go and do this. You need to be able to sit down and explain to them what it means and how it works. Right? I'm just looking at time. I know I'm mindful of my time. So what's the benefit to our students? We've talked about improved educational outcomes all the way through. But this is something that I really need to read to you. So probably targeted differentiation predicts greater subsequent achievement. The better the differentiation, the greater that student's achievement. And the greater their achievement, the greater their enjoyment. And the greater their enjoyment, the lower their boredom. A student who is happy and engaged is not going to be disruptive in your class. So this is the benefit to them, but at the same time it works out for us, right? Excellent. So we're shifting, what we're saying is shift the focus from students that we vaguely say have got additional needs. We know that they're struggling, but we just know that they're having a tough time, or we know that they're high achievers on the other side, and so we need to do something for them. And then in the middle, you just care for it. That whole concept of teach the middle, support the bottom, and hope for the best of their higher end kids. What we're saying here is do it the other way around. Give it to every single child. Address every single child's needs. Okay. Let's talk about the benefits to us. Students are going to be less likely to be disruptive. We will be making a huge change in them and their learning and their experiences. So we're the biggest influence on their achievement. So the benefit to us is we've got more engaged students. We can then be able to use these things that we've learned in our daily reviews. Find the biggest weakness for the entire class, set it up for your daily reviews. Use it to engage with parents. So when you're bringing a parent in for a student meeting, you can say, look, here's the data. Here's everything that we've taught this child, and here's their results for everything. You can then use that to engage with parents so that the kids can practice at home. We can provide them with sheets, or we can allocate them roles and tasks in Shobi, and the parents can use that to be able to engage with parents. So all the whole way through, yes, we're talking about how does this benefit students. There are massive benefits to us. Massive benefits. Now, I've already spoken to you about this. What do we need to do? Analyze the data. Constantly analyze the data. Use that data. Use the students that the data tells you. It's not you guessing. You click on the student need, on the area of needs, or the biggest gap. It tells you who the students in your class are. You can then make a group for those students. Or you go into the individual student themselves and you create a differentiated program for that individual student. And then when you analyze it and put it all together, you can then create like achievement groups. So if, there's one of the questions that I looked at where for another group, and 85 out of 85 students, 100% of their kids had failed one question. So that means you said it to the whole class. It's wonderful. It's excellent. So that's what we need to do. We need to start analyzing the data and not teach one size fits most type solutions. We need to start teaching them this size will fit you, one for one each child. So it's inclusive pedagogy that differentiates all of our students. That's what we need to do. I can't say this enough. Trust the data. Don't guess. Don't assume that what students in class, or when they're sitting on the mat and they look up to you with that face that says, I know what you're talking about. Don't trust that. Trust the actual raw numbers. If you've got a year 1 student, you've only got 1 year's worth of PAT testing at the beginning. A year 2 student, you've got the beginning and the end of year 1. You can look at that. Once you're in year 5, you're looking at 8 tests, not counting the year 3 NAPLAN data. So you've got all this information. Trust the data. I say it over and over again. Don't guess. Believe what the data has to say. When you set your learnings to your students, make sure that it's adequate and it's suitably difficult and challenging and all of those things. And then once it's done, go back as a team, collectively, collaboratively discuss what's happened, review the results, and share amongst yourself how effective it's been. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is me. Thank you so much for your time. Wonderful to be here. Trust the data.